everybody, welcome in to the long-awaited premiere of A Nichols Worth Daily, your one-stop shop for everything that happened today in news, politics, pop culture, and sports. I'm your host, Keaton Nichols. You can find me on the socials at Keaton D. Nichols. Thank you for joining me here on this journey, starting season 4 of A Nichols Worth. Oh, and shout out to all the folks been rocking since season 1. Have been seeing us go through all, I mean, as in us, I mean me, go through all different types of changes with the show. We were doing it 3 times a week, and now we're going to do some things a little bit differently here in season 4. Wanted to switch some things up, so it's a more interactive show this season. In short, I don't want to drag on about it, but a lot more guests, a lot more topics, and a lot more time to have conversation about the things that matter. So the world's kind of crazy. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that. Lots going on. And the goal is to have simple conversations that can break down these topics into, sort of bite-sized things that we can all digest and that we can all feel like we can be a part of without kind of pushing us to the outside of this partisan politics type of style of news that we see all the times and things like that. I think that's a very important thing. So we're going to dedicate to doing it 5 times a week, God willing, of course. And we already had some power outages this week. And as in power outages, I mean just one really that affected me. But outside of maybe power outages or something like that, we're going to be doing this Monday through Friday and having conversations every single day about the stuff that matters. So you can certainly share this on your timelines or share the A Nichols Worth page. You can even check us out on Spotify and Anchor and some other places as well. So make sure that you join in the conversation as much as possible. And that would make me happy. That would do me some justice if I could see that as well. So I appreciate the folks, again, that have been rocking with me since season 1. Maybe this is your first time watching, and I hope you enjoy the scenery. I hope you enjoy the show. So big opportunities to comment in. You guys know how to do that. Just leave a comment if you feel that there's something worth talking about. And I think that people are going to want to comment in on today's show. We're talking Bill Cosby. We're talking CDC and masks. And we're also talking about reparations a little bit later in the program as well. So make sure you get in on the conversation. We'll get to some headlines here in just a second. And our headlines today are sponsored by Parkour Athletic Apparel. Check it out right there at the bottom of the screen. Parkour Therapy, parkourtherapy.com is where you go. You can check out the new Parkour Plus workouts that you can do from your phone. Also use the promo code ANW2020 for 10% off store-wide, site-wide. It's my gift to you. You can get stuff like this. This is the brand new Parkour right here. It's camouflage. I don't know if you guys can see it. See what I did there? Anyway, let's get to some headlines. Shout out to our sponsors, Parkour. Biggest headline today definitely had to be this one coming out of the AP. Bill Cosby freed from prison, his sex conviction overturned. This one kind of shocked the world a little bit earlier. Didn't really see it coming. A lot of people did not see it coming, although when you read through the details of what happened, you understand that this is not some sort of exoneration of Bill Cosby in some kind of way. Like, this is not, saying, hey, Bill Cosby's off the hook. He totally didn't do anything that he was charged and then later convicted of doing. But the process was, I guess, for lack of a better term, not exactly straight. And that sort of dynamic sort of set off a huge conversation about Bill Cosby. Like I can remember being, in talk radio, we were talking about this, and not only that, but we were in the city of Philadelphia throughout the course of this entire trial. He was arrested in 2015 initially. And charged by District Attorney Kevin Steele. He was later found guilty based upon evidence that was supposed to essentially have been sealed away as a part of an agreement that was made back in 2006 and a prior district attorney that was involved in this. But instead, that sealed deposition, if you will, was allowed to be unsealed. And this is what happened, right? Like the whole case, we all remember what happened, the whole trial, the arrest, and then the trial. And, it opened up a lot in terms of the conversation about 2 different things specifically. The first thing was the crookedness of, not necessarily in any particular order, but one of the things rather was the crookedness of the criminal justice system. It's not necessarily a new concept, but it really became a place where folks could sort of be rooted in to particular opinions about what they felt about Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby became, a little bit bigger, if you will, than just the situation, right? The situation in front of him. This was the beginning of the Me Too movement. Certainly not the first time, obviously, something like this happened, but it was the beginning of the Me Too movement in that people were starting to talk about what Bill Cosby was accused of doing a lot. And not just talk about it, but people were, especially women, were giving their stories and saying, look, this has been happening for a very long time. And the culture around this has been way too laxed. It's been way too protective of the perpetrators of this kind of stuff. And the Me Too movement is sort of born. And there was a lot that came out of the Me Too movement initially. And even now, I think it still has, lasting impacts on the conversation we have about this kind of stuff now. But for Bill Cosby, he was sort of the first big fish to be discussed in this Me Too era movement, if you will. And there was a special sort of kind of focus on making sure that we got this one, right? Because we can't let this one slip through our fingers here. In many ways, Bill Cosby kind of represented the foundation, not of the Me Too movement, but the foundation of people finding out that this was an actual problem. Bill Cosby might have been the first person that they, sort of looked at and saw, a regular person that they trusted for whatever reason. Like I said, we have a weird relationship with celebrity culture here in America, but, people felt like they could trust Bill Cosby for whatever reason. He's on this TV show for years as, arguably America's dad and all this other stuff. And we got these concepts in our mind as to who built, not all of us, obviously, but a lot of people did, about who Bill Cosby was or what kind of person Bill Cosby was. And this was now challenging that notion. So you had a little bit of that going on as well. And then there's this unfairness about the criminal justice system that we kind of already know, that it's not exactly in the favor of black men like Bill Cosby. And so that kind of had to be considered as well. It became a mess on that side of the ball when it came to defending Bill Cosby from these accusations, right? Like there were so many women that came forward, so many stories, so many references and so many checks and things. Once this story was actually dug into, this is what it came up with. And then there were other people. There was Matt Lauer. There was Harvey Weinstein, right? And that was a part of the argument too. Hey, look, there are other people who have been accused of this very same thing, maybe even worse. How come the, fervent sort of desire to put Bill Cosby away, how come that is not copied and pasted onto these other individuals who are white? I mean, it was a mess. It was a mess to cover because at the core of this, when we really think about what, Me Too, quote, hashtag Me Too brought to the conversation about this, people skipped over the most important part, which was, we need to be talking about how this ought not be acceptable. What Bill Cosby is accused of doing at the time, before he was convicted a few years ago, but what he's accused of doing, we need to work on it as a society and figure out ways that we can cut that out ASAP. We don't need to live in it. We cannot, as a matter of fact, live in a culture that promotes rape culture. Frankly, what it is. It's a hard word to hear, but that's what it is. So we can't accept that. We can't let that live on, right? That's what Me Too should be about. Not, do you believe him or not? And that's immediately kind of where the conversation goes. And I'm sure the news today that Bill Cosby has been freed from prison, and we'll get into the details of exactly how, there were a lot of people who sprang up, right, from a few years ago that defended Bill Cosby to the moment he walked into prison as an 80-year-old or 81-year-old. To that very moment, a lot of people that woke up and saw this headline today and said, ha, I told you Bill Cosby was innocent. Told you. It's not what happened. What happened today did not exonerate Bill Cosby. What happened today does not mean that Bill Cosby did not do the things that he was accused of doing. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court took up this case and they argued essentially that the case was not handled very fairly and in earnest, according to how previous court proceedings went. Justice David Wecht, writing for the split court, this is straight from the AP, said Cosby had relied on the previous district attorney's decision not to charge him when the comedian gave his potentially incriminating testimony in Constan's civil case. This is what we're talking about back in 2006. The court called Cosby's subsequent arrest, quote, an affront to fundamental fairness, particularly when it results in a criminal prosecution that was foregone more than a decade. So, pretty stinging words from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court here. But in effect, they're saying here, look, the previous district attorney said, we will not charge you criminally if you tell us, basically just tell us what happened in this civil trial. If you tell us what happened, your testimony will be sealed away in this deposition, and you cannot, we will not, more like it was a promise, like we will not charge you. We will not criminally charge you. That's what happened back in 2006. Now, the new district attorney, Kevin Steele, he comes in on fire, says, I'm gonna charge Bill Cosby. I'm going to do it. And the process that was used involved unsealing that testimony, to use that evidence to say, see, Bill Cosby even admitted that he did X, Y, and Z. So there it is. It's a court technicality, if you will. A technicality that, by the way, could have been avoided. We talked about this a lot during the course of the trial, that Kevin Steele, I believe he's the Montgomery County District Attorney, just north of Philadelphia County. The district attorney there, God bless him, but there's some things here. There's some things here that you have to follow along with in order to do this the right way. I mean, you might have him dead to rights, or you might think that you have him dead to rights, but you still have to follow the law. That was the one thing that kind of seemed odd to me during this. Not that I in any way, shape, or form took Bill Cosby's side at any point in this process, and still don't, because he did what he did, and that's still wrong. Whether or not the legal process necessarily followed something is a separate conversation, which I'm having now. But it didn't seem, like that was normal practice. I don't know if you want to call it fair, but it didn't seem like it was normal practice, right? If something is sealed, anything, right, is sealed, it's not meant to be reopened again. You don't break the seal on something like that. And especially when it comes to something from a legal perspective, a statement that, as Justice Wecht said, could have potentially been incriminating to him at a later point. If he gave that testimony with the promise that there wasn't going to be any charges, and then now you're using that testimony to charge him criminally, that's what Justice Wecht is saying. I don't know if that's cool, right? Like, I don't know if you could do that. And he's right to say that. I thought that process was way off, right? But the conversation about what Bill Cosby did, which is effectively which kind of kicked off the Me Too movement, is still relevant, right? The legal process of how you try and get Bill Cosby behind bars, which was the effort from 2015 until 17 or 18 when he finally did go to prison. That effort to get Bill Cosby behind bars is what the Supreme Court today said was not right. It was not level. It was not fair. An affront to fundamental fairness, as they said. But it doesn't mean that what Cosby did admit to, drugging and sexually assaulting women, it does not exonerate that behavior. We still have to be able to, especially as people of color, who in this situation, it's very easy to try and take sides, right? But in this situation, we've got to be able to see the wrongness in the individual. Even if that individual is being wronged by the justice system, if you will, at the time, we got to be able to see both things. It's a part of the challenge of being black. And it applies, that concept sort of applies to other areas and other things. But specifically with this, I felt like so many people struggled with trying to understand both of these concepts, And both of these concepts can be true. Bill Cosby can be guilty of something, anything, right? And also the criminal justice system tasked with keeping, the justice or preserving the justice can also be unfair towards that individual. Both of those things can be true. And it was one of those instances that was very hard to have a conversation about, one or the other, when the other subject was kind of being tied in with that. Anyway, today's news, I want to know what you think on this too. If you're out there listening live or watching live, it doesn't necessarily, I think, erase, like I said, what the foundation of Me Too is. Because this was the first major Me Too case where there were other women that stepped up and said, hey, I heard your experience. I actually had a similar experience either with the same individual or with somebody that I work with. And like I said, there was a whole era afterward where there was a lot of people being fired, a lot of men especially being fired, being released from their high-ranking positions, and embarrassment from these stories coming to the surface. And now these stories the individual stories don't necessarily receive as much attention, but you still do see that the culture is there. A lot, I think it provided the confidence maybe for a lot of people to step up in that moment and say, there are other people who are going through this same exact thing. That was the most important thing that we should have pulled out of the Bill Cosby situation. That yes, the criminal justice system was a little crooked in how they got him into the prison, but also that the actions and the behaviors that we know that he admitted to at one time are still something that are irreprehensible. That it's a culture that it's a culture in this country that we can no longer allow to get beyond this point. It cannot. So hopefully, people understood that and people got that. Like I said, let me know what you all think. I see my homie Tahita checking in. She says, yo, checking in for Keaton's take. Yeah, that is my take. I think that I don't think that Bill Cosby is guilty. Bill Cosby told you that Bill Cosby is guilty of what he was, being charged with, or, whatever you want to say, however you want to put that, right? Bill Cosby told you what Bill Cosby did. So I never really thought that that was a worthwhile debate to have with somebody. Do you think he did it or do you think he not? No. But I do think that that process ought to be examined, right? Like we shouldn't be unsealing sealed documents. I don't, this might kind of seem controversial in its delivery, but I also don't necessarily think it was, we got to get him because he's black. Like he's the black man. And so let's pile up the charges on him and let's make sure that we get him. And that was kind of hard for me to kind of explain to people too. It happens that injustices happen to black people all the time in the criminal justice system. And there are a number of reasons why that happens. But it was hard for me. I'll put it that way. It was hard for me to cop to the idea that Bill Cosby, what was happening to Bill Cosby was happening to him specifically because he was black. I mean, Bill Cosby had the best lawyers around. He had, whatever lawyers that he wanted around. He had the best legal advice, the best legal strategies, the best legal team that he could buy. When it comes to that, you're pretty much on a level playing field. Now, how people saw him and how the jury saw him, of course, people have their prejudice. But I felt like it was more so about the movement of the time right now. It kind of just felt like, in many ways, people were going to be okay with Kevin Steele sort of stepping over the rules in this one because it was kind of important to get this one. But that's not how the legal system works. I may say in my own mind, in my own moral head, yeah, he deserves to be in jail. Well, we have laws in this country, and maybe I disagree with those laws, and maybe I feel some type of way about those laws. But if you go through the system, then the laws should be kept. The rules should be kept. That didn't happen here. That's not a reason to defend Bill Cosby. That's just a reason to, that's just a criticism of the culture, a criticism of the entire thing. So no, today's news does not exonerate Bill Cosby, but let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comment section and we will do our best to get that comment right here on the show. Other big news coming this week involving masks. Yay. More mask news. Excuse me again. Whew. All right, now, so the news coming out. This is the headline down at the bottom of the screen. CDC director says vaccinated people are safe from the Delta variant and do not need to wear masks. Now, I wanted to get on the air yesterday. We had some power issues, of course, but this was a very interesting headline because yesterday we received a report from the World Health Organization. Who? The World Health Organization. Who? Every once in a while, I'm going to try and throw some, light jokes in there. Let's see if you guys get it. Anyway, the World Health Organization yesterday released a statement that essentially said, look, we need to warn you guys about the spread of this Delta variant because it's similar to the ancestral strain of COVID in that it's kind of easy to catch. It's easy to spread, especially through aerosols and touching things, maybe that somebody breathed on or had some droplets. So it's probably best, right? This is the World Health Organization looking after the whole world, right? And they're saying, I don't know. I mean, even if you're vaccinated, it's easy to spread. You should probably still wear a mask, man. Like, to be perfectly honest, that's what we say. World Health Organization, right? Today, Rochelle Walensky, she, of course, is director of the CDC. The CDC is responsible for the United States. They're not necessarily responsible for everybody. They're looking at this thing from an everybody perspective, but, she's looking out for the United States. Here's the exact quote. She says, if you are vaccinated, you are safe from the variants that are circulating here in the United States. She added later that it was exactly right that vaccinated people do not need to wear masks. Oh, whoa. Wait a minute. Literally yesterday, the World Health Organization says, look, you might want to wear masks even if you're vaccinated because of the Delta variant. Today, the CDC is saying, you don't really need the mask if you're vaccinated. You're safe from the Delta variant. Who's right here? What's going on? Is this contradictory information? Should we trust these individuals? These are the sort of conversations that spike from information like this. Now, there's an easy explanation for this. She responded to the World Health Organization remarks yesterday just by clarifying and saying they're dealing with a worldwide situation where far fewer people are vaccinated than in the United States, given the global vaccine disparities, and therefore issuing more cautious advice, right? The World Health Organization is saying, look, for the world, for everybody, doesn't necessarily have as high a vaccination rates as the United States. You should probably be more cautious with this thing. It's a simple, I don't know, even if you don't want to call that a miscommunication sort of thing. This kind of stuff has happened time and again when we talk about the virus, if you will. We talk about COVID, and it has only served to sort of inflame the mistrust that we have of government individuals or scientists or medical professionals that are tasked with figuring out what the heck this is and how we can keep ourselves protected from it. But there's something that we got to understand, and it's a point that I've repeated before on previous versions of this that I think is appropriate to unearth, if you will, in this situation. And that's that a year and a half ago, we knew absolutely nothing about this. We, as in the general public, yes, and the medical professionals, and the virologists and whatnot that are tasked with, again, finding out what's going on here. We didn't know anything a year and a half ago. And as that information, sort of progressed, we in the general public kind of got in on that scientific process of finding out what the heck this is and what the heck to do with it. And most of us are not scientists. Most of us probably don't think like scientists either. We hear information and that's truth. That's fact. 100 emoji. We don't sometimes take, a second to understand and consider who's giving this information and under what circumstances. Information has changed. First it was masks, then it was like don't touch stuff, and then, maybe you should wear 2 masks. You should get vaccinated as soon as you can. Certain amounts of it. There's so much information coming in about how to keep yourself safe or what the best practice is for living with the virus. And I think the truth of the matter is we're still figuring it out. So if things become kind of cloudy and how they, sort of come out sometimes. I think when we hear information like this, hey, yesterday I read a headline that said masks not necessary. Today I read a headline that says masks are necessary, or vice versa. It's not a reason to distrust the individuals who have been tasked with protecting us from this. But we do have to understand that they're not going to know everything, but they certainly know a lot more than you and me. I continue to say this. It might be a roller coaster ride. I might have to ride up and down with them, but I'm here for the ride. They're in a much better position to tell me or to tell anybody what's going on than within my own brain. It's fun to speculate, share with your friends, hey, here's what I think is happening. But in real life, when it comes to what we should actually do, this may come as a surprise, but I think it's listen to the experts. Let me know what you think in the comments section below on this inaugural episode of A Nichols Worth Daily. By the way, things were going to be a little bit more highly produced here on the show. I have some sounders and some other stuff coming in a little bit later in the week. As we said, this power outage kind of delayed a lot of stuff, but I'm glad I'm able to get on here and broadcast today with you all. Let me read some of the comments that are coming up. Dave McGowan comments in talking about the Bill Cosby news today. He said a fair trial is what he deserves. I would agree with that. Now, like I said, the entire issue or the entire time of this Bill Cosby story, if you listen to any of my programming from back then, it's great. You should, objectively speaking. But if you listen to that programming, you see, I'm certainly in no mood to defend Bill Cosby in any situation or anybody else. As you mentioned, I think you mentioned Harvey Weinstein a little bit earlier, Dave. The same thing. I'm not interested in defending these guys. I have 0.00% interest in that because I think defending their actions, the actions that I don't know whether or not they happened or not, I just have testimony and witness. That's all I have, right? That's all I have, right? And then I have, of course, his own very own testimony that told what he did that was never supposed to be exposed to the world, but now we know, right? But that's it. That's what we have. So I was never in a position to defend Bill Cosby, his actions, his past actions. Indefensible. But in terms of a fair trial, does he deserve a fair trial? In the United States, yes. He's an American citizen. He was born in Philadelphia. He deserves a fair trial. I mean, even if he wasn't born in could be born anywhere. But my point is, he's an American citizen. He deserves a fair trial. And I think the idea that Kevin Steele wanted to bury Cosby so much, it's like, look, man, I feel you. I understand. Like, this is irreprehensible, what he did. And he should have been held accountable, honestly, long before this. That's a different conversation. But according to the way that our law works, if you start bending those rules just to get one specific person, that's right along the lines of what we talk about. And I'm not trying to link these two together and say that Bill Cosby is the same as, a victim of police brutality or police violence or something like that. But that's the same line of conversation, right? That the rules and the laws can sort of be bent just to make sure that we get this one specifically. And we can't do that. It's a slippery slope, if you will. And yes, everyone deserves to be treated the same, especially in a court system. Let's go to Tahita, who's checking in on Twitter. Shout out to the Periscope fans today. Got some folks out here on Periscope. Tahita says Cosby's release in conversation with the fight for prison abolishment. Thoughts? There are some connecting bridges there, perhaps. I think to be honest, I think the fight for prison abolishment is a very worthwhile conversation. 100%, very worthwhile conversation. But I think what happened with Cosby, like I said, there are some bridges there, right? Like, we do become obsessed with this idea that, like, things can be prosecuted out of being a problem. And this seemed like one of those moments where it was like I said, Kevin Steele seemingly wanted to, like, make this right. Like, he was going to make this right no matter what. And ultimately, the idea was that by making this right, the way of making this right is to send Cosby to prison. That's the only way to make this right. And so when you talk about reforming and abolishing, our concept of prison here in the United States, a very, 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 very long and conversation to have. But when you start talking about that, maybe there are less hungry, district attorneys across the country that are saying to themselves, I want to get my arrest rate up, or I want to get my, conviction rate up, or I want to, lock away more criminals. Maybe that doesn't become the goal if indeed you then reform the prison system. So, yeah, you said abolition. Yeah, I figured that was where we were going, prison abolition. So, it's one of those conversations that, again, I think it has a few bridges there, but I do still think that they're separate enough concepts where it's like, again, I think we can have two separate conversations. The criminal justice system, we know this. Now, I shouldn't say we know this. It's not an obvious thing for everybody, but I think for a lot of people, they know that the criminal justice system is very, very broken. And it's not, it's broken because it's unfair towards certain individuals. And Bill Cosby looks like the kind of individuals that it's typically unfair to. And so that was the blending of conversations that became hard to separate. To say that I understand as a black person that Bill Cosby is getting railed by the system here. But as I said earlier, my hot take is I don't think it was because he was black. I think he was black and he was being railed by the system, which is a common connection that we see all the time. And we want to jump in and say, hey, whoa. What's up with the anti-black thing, right? Like that's our first approach to it without looking at what's happening behind it. But look, an aberration of the law is an aberration of the law. It shouldn't have happened. Point blank, period. Let me know what you think in the comments section. You can hit me up right now. Let me know. Just talking about Bill Cosby being freed from prison. I also got a chance to talk about the CDC director giving a little bit of conflicting information, seemingly, with who said yesterday, the World Health Organization. So sometimes these things happen. I had a whole big conversation with somebody about masks. It was a wild thing. Hopefully one of my listeners today, I think he was here for that conversation. I'll give that story on the other side. We got a quick word from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
It's you. Only you can decide to forget about yesterday's failures and focus on today and tomorrow's success. We all share the same 24 hours. Your dreams won't chase you. Chase your dreams. Don't allow the world to run you. Run the world. Don't talk about the ladder. Climb it. Don't dip your toe into the pool. Dive in. That's the only way you'll learn how to swim. It all starts with you. And in the end, only you can change you.
Yes, sir. Welcome back. It is A Nichols Worth Daily. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. It's a great way to listen in. We're streaming live on YouTube right now. You can leave comments even there. Check out the broadcast afterward. Make sure you subscribe to the page at A Nichols Worth. Talking headlines today. Headlines. Bill Cosby, of course, was our first story, the biggest news of the day. Saw that trending very, very early. Situation with Bill Cosby is never easy to have a conversation. It's never easy to have a conversation about Bill Cosby. So many elements that are there. But I gave some of my thoughts on it a little bit earlier. I think he's very guilty of what he said that he did back in 2006. However, the legal process to get him into the jail that happened a few years ago was not very straight. It was not very straight. Today, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to as much, saying that process is a little funny. The exact quote from Justice David Wecht on this, who wrote the decision on this for the split court, rather. Said that Cosby had relied on the previous district attorney's decision not to charge him when the comedian gave his potentially incriminating testimony in Constand's civil case. That evidence was absolutely critical for getting Cosby into prison this time around. So let me know what you think. He is currently serving a 23-year sentence that is coming from Maya as well. Well, currently he is at home chilling because he was released from prison today after this decision came back. He was serving, I believe, I want to say 3 to 10 or something like that initially. And that obviously is off the table. He was almost 3 years into that sentence. He was served about 2.5 years already. So this news certainly most interesting on this day. If you have any more comments on it, let me know in the comments section. I'll do my best to bring it up. All right, let me get to my next story as well. This one coming from Vice News. This was interesting information on Mr. Bob Johnson. If you don't know who Bob Johnson is, Bob Johnson used to he created, of course, what we know as Black Entertainment Television, BET. He sold it to Viacom. I want to say... Actually, I don't have that here. I thought I had that in my notes. I don't know exactly when he sold it to Viacom, but it was several years ago. Bob Johnson sells BET to Viacom. He becomes a billionaire. And according to this Vice headline here, America's first black billionaire. So good for him. Good for Robert Johnson and BET. Now, the cool thing about Robert Johnson is, because a lot of people have beef with him basically for like how BET ended up as a station, right? As a cable network. A lot of people argue it could have been better. It could have been, more black centric, but whatever, right? Like it was what it was. And he ends up selling it for a huge amount to Viacom. And maybe that's what he wanted. He's 75, I think, right now. Got to be able to spend that money sometime. But anyway, good for him. He's a billionaire now. And he oftentimes speaks up on the issue of reparations. Now, reparations, a concept that would essentially give descendants of black slaves, payment, if you will, for the hardships they endured, for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a very, very simple way of putting it. But, the way that Bob Johnson sort of lays it out, he's saying, look, and he's a billionaire too. Right. And some people have already said, well, if you got $1 billion, why don't you start giving it to black people? That's kind of the issue that he addresses here, right? The issue of reparations is not easy to talk about in terms of logistics, if you will. Like, how's this going to be done? I don't think there are actually people that argue against the point of reparations. And let me know what you think in the comment section. I'm personally not one of these people, right? Like, I think that certainly the United States, given its history, it's not a very long history, but I think given its history, has been more than open to this concept of reparations when it has recognized that it has wronged a particular people. And that's important to understand here because America is a country that is made up of many different types of peoples, especially now, but especially as it grew and as we started to, figure out more of what America was, really all about. You start to see that it's a very multicultural country. And so the concept that America could do bad things to Americans or people living within America that might not call themselves a part of the bigger social group, they've been open to this concept before. How it happens with black folks is a little bit more complex, although the core concept is still the same. Pay us what you owe. Some have argued, and this article does a really good job of laying this out in Vice, that reparations are basically the things that we have, the sort of social changes that we've begun to see in the country, especially over the last couple of years. Critical race theory education, which we'll talk about tomorrow on the show. Stay tuned. That's a teaser. They mentioned the housing grant program in Evanston, Illinois, $5 billion of targeted support and debt relief for black farmers specifically, $50 billion in corporate pledges in the wake of George Floyd's murder dedicated to combating systemic racism and inequality. I don't know how that money is really broken down, but sure, I'm here for it. There are people that say, look, this is the new reparations. Like, this is how we can give back to black folk at this point. We can't reach in our pockets, however you want to define our, by the way. We can't reach in our pockets and just start handing black folks money, or people that look like they're black, start handing them money. It's just not how it works. But what Bob Johnson says is that's not exactly far enough. That's not exactly it, right? He says that's what's happening to reparations. It's being cut up into small pieces of things that look and feel like we want to end systemic racism. We want to end police brutality and shootings, and to provide financing to black small business owners, right? Like that's what he's really, kind of saying here. Look, there's these little miniature ways that we can help out here. Now that this monster problem, this huge issue has developed in many parts of the black community because of slavery, yes, and then the 100 years after slavery of Jim Crow America, at least Jim Crow South. I mean, something is owed for that, obviously, but who pays it? Is it white people only? Is it tax dollars, right? Because tax dollars are technically paying for the programs that I just listed, right? These are social programs. These are government programs, which means they come from our pockets. We can't fund our own prize. It's like buying your own Christmas present. It's like giving your spouse $10 towards your next birthday gift. Like, what? Like, okay, but it kind of feels like less of a thing now. And reparations are important. This article goes on to quote Johnson, and something I think important that he says. He says, people say, well, we really don't need reparations because when you put all these things together, that we talk about, all these government programs, you put them together, it's reparations. It's just not one big bill or asking this country to stand up and apologize, he says, and you're not asking people to pay out of their paychecks. That first part is kind of important, though, right? Like, it's like a part of reparations has to be an acknowledgement that we screwed up, right? That has been a part of every reparations package in this whole world, if you look at it. It's not just, okay, here's some money. We prevented you all from earning an income or earning a living of any kind for 250 years. Sorry. Let me throw you a few dollars to make up for it. I heard you're struggling. Here's a 20. Don't mention it. Bob Johnson is saying, look, that's not enough. That's not good enough to make up for what's happening. A, because it's monetarily just not enough, right? It's a good point, but also there is no admission of guilt, so to speak. There is no acknowledgement that says we screwed up. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't the way that things were at the time. It wasn't a different time. I hate when people say that too. Oh, slavery was a different time. 10 minutes ago was a different time, okay? Like, if you want to be technical, being a human being and being a decent human being, and especially the way that America describes being a decent, good human being, all of that doesn't change from time to time. Things change. Culture changes. And if what we're insinuating is that things were a particular way back then, but they have changed to something different now, then you are insinuating that thing that you don't want to pay reparations for was simply a part of the culture. Slavery was a part of the culture. That's what they mean what people mean when they say it was a different time. It doesn't mean that things change about being a human. It just means that it was a part of the culture then, and it became a part of the culture later, and it became a part of the culture as we were fixing it, and it's a part of the culture now. So yes, reparations is a big deal. It's a big topic. Not because America owes us some money or owes us some dollars. But the conversation about moving forward, I don't ever believe will move forward until there's an admission that says we messed up. We screwed up. We intentionally did this to you. And that makes us bad people. And you say, well, what does that do? Who cares, right? But the very fight, like I said, that we're going to talk about later this week with critical race theory, and that term, if you ever heard it, is really about that admission of who you are, or who you were rather, from the beginning. Critical race theory doesn't look to destroy the American image. It looks to tell the actual truth about what happened. Let people make up their mind as to what kind of country America is after you just put the facts on the table, son. Let them see it. Just once. Bob Johnson calls this approach of government money and everything else like that, he calls it placebo paternalism. Yikes. Some P words there, but essentially it means we're being lulled to sleep with this. We should not be happy with the conversation about reparations until they happen in full. Just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think by chiming in the comments section. Let's see what we got over here. We got some more comments. Let's see. We got another one from Maya who says, yes, they aren't going to give us paper, but will give opportunities and pathways to success. Right. And that kind of does tie in with the American way, where it's the pursuit of happiness concept, right? We talk about that all the time, how elegantly that's written into the Constitution. It doesn't guarantee you happiness, but it guarantees you the pursuit of happiness. And I think opening up those passageways to happiness is the right move. The problem is it should have happened so long ago that now, what does that mean for us to have this benefit now, right? It's like running a 400-meter race and you don't have shoes until 600 meters. I'm sorry, until halfway through, until 200 meters. And then someone runs up to you and says, hey, here's some shoes. Now you can catch up. Well, it's too late now. The race is halfway over. What is this going to do for me? That's the way that I look at it in that sense. I'm not saying that it's bad. If you're trying to run a foot race, and you didn't have any shoes on, yeah, you need shoes. However, if you expect me to compete and possibly win that race, giving me these shoes halfway through the race, it doesn't matter. And that's the concept that I think Bob Johnson is getting at, is look, don't be happy with them just giving you shoes halfway through the race. You know what you need to ask for in this foot race? You need to ask for a car. You need to ask for a motor vehicle, and maybe that'll propel you through the rest of the race to catch up, because it's what you deserve. Not that it's what you need per se, but it's what you deserve. So very interesting perspective, I think, from Bob Johnson on that, but I feel him. Devon T keeps it fit. Parker says he got that new parkour shirt on. I need to get me one. These are crispy. I didn't even know if anyone could see it. All camoed out, parkourtherapy.com. You got a bonus promo today. 10% off ANW 2021. Oh, yeah. Let's go back to Twitter. Appreciate that, T. The theme of today's show, says Tahita, issues that should have been dealt with a long time ago. I like that, Tahita. Perfect way to end it on this evening. I appreciate folks for joining in and sticking with me through the technical issues. Had a little bit of a blackout over the last day or so, but that's cool. We persisted through it, and I appreciate folks for staying patient and all that good stuff. Shout out to our sponsors, Parkour Athletic Apparel. Right down there at the bottom of the screen, in case you're interested in more information, parkourtherapy.com. They're also on social media. Check out Parkour Athletic Apparel and Parkour Therapy on social media, and use that code ANW2021 for a discount off any merch that you might grab on the website. I'm at Keaton D. Nichols on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow the show at A Nichols Worth. Everywhere else, Spotify, Anchor, Facebook, all of that good stuff. We'll actually be back tomorrow. I've always wanted to say that. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. for another fresh A Nichols Worth Daily. Make sure you share this on your timeline for bonus points, and I will see you all tomorrow.